Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks. And yesterday, Wargaming made a fool out of me, not once, but twice. And that is because as I released my video on the Vipera, which is going to be the first ever Italian tank destroyer, which has been confirmed as a premium tank destroyer since in content that they released concurrently at the same time, they gave me absolutely no idea that there would be a whole tech tree of Italian tank destroyers coming to the game. And so I thought this was just a one-off, a bit like the TVP 100, the Czechoslovakian tank destroyer, of which there have been no Czechoslovakian tank destroyers confirmed to the game. But that's not all. Literally, as the NDA was revealed for this vehicle, and I talked in great depth about its 8-second intraclip reload, basically making the vehicle very redundant compared to other vehicles in the comparison, Wargaming released their own footage, or shall I say release of the super test, changing one very important thing. And yet, can you see it? That the 8 seconds intraclip reload of the material that I was given for the NDA release date was already outdated before it was released in time, and it has now been changed to 6 seconds. So that significantly changes the Vipera and probably all of the Italian tank destroyers. That Wargaming are already making huge changes by removing 25% off the intraclip, and that's why it's always very important that things are subject to change. This significantly changes how competitive the Vipera would be, because previously it would kind of just be a worse TS5. Now, at least it's a TS5 that's a lot more flexible on a ridgeline, and being able to burst out 2,000 damage in 24 seconds is going to be oh so much more powerful than bursting it out in 32 seconds, obviously. Now, don't get me wrong, 2,000 damage over 24 seconds is still a very long time, but that pumps up the DPM of this vehicle from 1,700 up to 2,000. Anyway, I'm not going to go into great detail about the Vipera because that was all in my video yesterday. But if you go back and watch that video, please take into account that every time I'm talking about the 8-second intraclip, it's actually already been updated to 6 and things are subject to change. So yesterday, Wargaming released a video on their YouTube channel of Developer Diaries, Italian tank destroyers. And I would love to be able to present the information they have on their homepage, but there is nothing outside of the video. So I just thought that today our only real option is to watch the video together. But I would just like to clarify, if you want to watch this video without an idiot like me talking over it, then please go and check out their video on the official channel. But considering this is the only available format of their information transfer, which is not unusual in 2022, I'm going to be reacting to the video to be able to give my opinion.
A branch of Italian medium tanks with new auto-reloading mechanics was added.
And the Italian mediums were some of my favorites in the game. They were absolutely amazing, absolutely wonderful, until Wargaming, for some unknown reason, decided to nerf most of them, even though their win ratios were hovering at about 49%. In the last 60 days, the Progetto 65's win ratio has been 48.56. It's always very interesting for me when Wargaming is so quick to be able to nerf vehicles that frankly aren't overpowered, yet they're still sitting there and allowing, you know, the auto-loading heavy tanks to sit with significantly above average win ratios.
In 2021, they were joined by heavy tanks,
which hardly anyone is really playing. Because of course, you'd have to be pretty crazy to want to play a Rinoceronte when you could just go and play a VZ55 or a Kranvagn.
And now, thanks to a lot of meticulous work, Italian tank destroyers will appear in the game.
I can't wait.
Only a few of the vehicles in this branch were ever physically built, and some of them only had incomplete design plan.
And of course, as World of Tanks gets older and older and older, this is the unsolvable problem for them. That do you really need that many tanks inside a nation's army? No, you really don't. So for Wargaming to keep adding content to the game, they have to stretch the boundaries. And I have absolutely no problem with that. I would far rather that Wargaming be able to, should we say, have a little bit of creative freedom to create interesting tank lines that go into the game, as long as they don't break it, then we weren't to get any new content into the round. So I'm definitely not one of those historical purists.
But thanks to the surviving draft and archive materials, we managed to follow the line of engineering thought and materialize these vehicles in-game.
Fantastic.
Meet the Italian tank destroyers.
Oh, wow. So immediately just initial first impressions. So that one looks like the premium, the Vipera that we were talking about yesterday. They all look like they have very rounded turrets, but they're all very flat. I wonder how Wargaming are going to be able to balance out how they perform against high explosive anti-tank rounds, because as everybody knows, premium rounds against flat armor can do incredible things. So are they going to be like a T110E3 level of thickness where even premium rounds don't have a chance of going through the cheeks, or are they going to be like T110E4 level of thickness where premium rounds are going to be able to go through the cheek armor? If they're going to be anything like the premium...
The Italian Army Command had ideas about creating self-propelled artillery guns as far back as the second half of the 1930s. However, initial experiments were unsuccessful, mainly because of the attempts to mount a 75mm gun on a light tank chassis. Sometime later, the German army started using the Stug 3. This vehicle was of keen interest to the Italians and inspired them to try creating their own self-propelled gun again.
This is always interesting. A lot of people who only play World of Tanks and don't really look at the historical naming of vehicles will always think that it's either a tank destroyer, it's a self-propelled gun, and self-propelled guns have to fire indirectly in a huge arc. Whereas the line between a self-propelled gun and a tank destroyer is actually kind of blurred from a historical sense.
Together with the engineers from the Ansaldo engineering company, the Italian army managed to create a prototype, the Semovente M41.
So here we go, the first tier 5. Definitely looks like a Stug, right? I can't imagine this thing's going to have any interesting gameplay, but really exciting that Wargaming are starting a tech tree from tier 5. Quite often, new tech trees, sometimes they start at 6, 7, and sometimes at 8, 9, or 10, right? Well, if it's 10, it's not really much of a tech tree. You get what I'm trying to suggest. So really cool that we're going to have a whole glut of vehicles, 6 of them, I guess if it's starting at tier 5, to enjoy.
Its look and idea resembled its analog, the Stug 3.
Sure.
A non-rotating cabin was mounted instead of the turret and turret platform.
Obviously, I'd like to clarify, you see that big in development at the bottom right? Yeah, don't think that the textures are going to be like this. This is just things that they're getting the outline model before. Obviously, they're going to be adding all of the high-def textures on top.
The 75mm howitzer was put there. The main series of this tank destroyer was produced on the Carro Armato M1441 medium tank chassis.
Which is already in the game.
The vehicle in the game will have low maneuverability, but excellent concealment and view range.
So it could be a little bit of a sneaky long-range TD. If it's got excellent view range, if you were to pair that either with a good crew and coated optics or binoculars, you might have something that's valuable for being able to snipe your opponents.
Transition to the tank destroyer branch will be available from the tier 4 P2640 medium tank.
Well, obviously this isn't so significant because it's not branching off from a tier 6 or a tier 7 where you might have to save up a substantial amount of experience. But still, uncheck accelerated crew training in your P2640. My recommendation would be to save up between 10 and 15,000 experience depending on how safe you want it to be, and then you'll be able to get the new tier 5 tank destroyer from the get-go. Just a word about the P2640, this is actually one of the best tier 4 tanks inside the game. It's a completely filthy OP seal clubber because of the high explosive rounds that tier 4 medium gets. 70mm of pen, 175 damage. Go and load high explosive in that tank, get your 10,000, 15,000 experience, but then stop, okay? Because I'm not trying to encourage people to be filthy seal covers in World of Tanks.
That's why the Semovente M41 will help players smoothly adapt and adjust their playstyle for the following tank destroyers of the branch. Tier 6 is occupied by the Semovente M43 Bassotto.
I love it. The Semovente Bassotto. These names are going to be fantastic to be able to add into the YouTube videos. Okay, so initial impressions. It kind of looks a little bit Swedish to me. You know, some of those like the tier 3 Swedish tank destroyer. I think it's called the Stridsvagn 74. Is that the medium? Sorry, I meant the IKV 72. Kind of has a similar visual appeal from that, but obviously still looking a bit more like a Hetzer. Let's find out more about it.
The development and production of this vehicle started when the Italian command belatedly started to realize that enemy tanks had clearly improved their armor protection and armament characteristics.
Okay, so they needed something to be able to go through thicker armor as the war was developing.
solution should have been the Semovente M43 tank destroyer. Gameplay-wise, it resembles the previous vehicle of the branch. The differences are in its armament. This TD is armed with a 102mm gun with high...
So it's probably going to end up with about 250 alpha damage. That's not bad for tier 6, but remember there are quite a few tank destroyers that are hitting substantially harder. But again, I can only guess as to what Wargaming will make a 102mm caliber gun deal. It also looks like it's very low profile. That could mean that its camera rating is good, and it looked very fast there.
Accuracy and penetration, which allows it to easily cause damage to heavy vehicles at a distance. Its armor compared to tier 5 has also improved, but you shouldn't rely on it in close combat.
Still very useful for being able to absorb high explosive rounds. Quite a lot of people, at tier 5 especially, which this tank will meet a lot of, are firing high explosive rounds. And just having like that little bit of armor can really help out. So don't rely on it in close combat as Wargaming says, but still it's going to be nice to have just a little bit of armor on these tanks.
In general, the first two vehicles of the branch are classic tank destroyers with a cabin. They are slow with good armament and average armor for their...
Sorry, they're slow now. Okay, they didn't look slow. Maybe Wargaming were putting a turbo on that or adjusting some of the statistics. Average armor for their tiers, okay guns. They said that they're going to be accurate with decent view range. Doesn't really seem like an assault tank destroyer branch so far, which is what I thought from the premium tank yesterday.
Tiers. However, the subsequent vehicles can't be compared to regular ones. They're completely new tank destroyers with unique features that will unlock from tier to tier.
Okay. Well, show us them then. What are you doing, trying to hold your cards?
Tier 7 is represented by the VII Controcarro Mod 1956.
That thing looks a lot more like a T-28 prototype kind of vibe, right? Definitely, almost like a T-28 prototype, almost like an American design on the turret as well. All right, let's find out a little bit about this one then.
1956. The vehicle was designed after World War II and doesn't resemble the previous TDs in the branch much.
Nope, it's got a
this
turret.
Is mainly because Italian tank building came out of hibernation and the revision of its concepts began in the 1950s. American designs with some additions formed the basis of the new TD project. First off, the vehicle received a rotating turret with a limited gun traverse arc of 60 degrees.
Well, that's immediately super exciting. You could clearly see the American design in it, and to have a 60 wide gun arc, 30 to the left, 30 to the right, will allow you to be flexible. There aren't that many tank destroyers at tier 7 which have a semi-traversable turret, apart from, I guess, the Challenger, the British tier 7 tank destroyer, which is actually probably one of the better ones. When you use the larger caliber gun on the Challenger, you have a 45-degree arc to the right and to the left, 90 in total. So the Challenger's still going to have a little bit more of a gun arc than this if you're using the big gun. That should give you an idea of how the vehicles will feel.
Limited gun traverse arc of 60 degrees. And excellent gun depression angles.
Oh wow, just like the Challenger.
Secondly, a drum-type autoloader was installed for a 105mm gun.
That's exciting. It's not often that you get that autoloader at tier 7. There aren't actually that many autoloaders at tier 7, and it's when you get to tier 8 that it really bumps up. So this thing could be a little bit of a mid-tier powerhouse for any of you out there who don't really want to play the high tiers. Or still exciting that Wargaming are starting to figure out that maybe you want to give players a little bit more at tier 6 and tier 7 rather than just waiting for them to get to tier 8 or tier 9 before you reward them. Because probably there'll be quite a lot of people who just don't even bother or stop playing the tech tree at 6 or 7 because they're just not willing to get through to get to the mechanics.
And lastly, the vehicle received excellent frontal armor that allowed for close-range combat.
Okay, so they've gone from being slow, good view range snipers with no armor to now being turreted, I guess slow, but excellently armored vehicles. Wow, that step up from tier 6 to tier 7 is going to be huge.
The Semovente Controcarro Mod 1956 clearly shows what the gameplay of the following vehicles in the branch will be.
Well, just show us them. Show us them! But I do like, all in all, so far, how the branch seems to be growing. You go from that kind of Stug to a Stug at tier 6, although I guess it's still slow, to this kind of more of assault TD. Probably will play a little bit like a T-28 HMC, that second reward vehicle from the first set of the personal campaigns. Very interesting so far. Let's find out about Tier 8.
TD is the Controcarro Mod 67.
Wow, the Controcarro Mod 67. And again, doesn't that just look like a T110E4 to you at Tier 8? How crazy. Of course, it looks like it's way longer than a T110E4, but definitely looks like a T110E4 at Tier 8. Amazing.
Work on this vehicle began in the 1960s, when Italy cooperated closely with German and Swiss industries.
Oh no. They can't work with the Germans again. This isn't going well.
However, tank destroyers were generally becoming a thing of the past at that time, losing to anti-tank missile armaments. So it
did you see those T-49s? It looked like T-49s or Sheridans. Yeah, anti-tank missile armaments. That's where kind of the age of this kind of a tank destroyer kind of just died out.
So it was no coincidence that this TD remained in the preliminary design stage.
Wow.
Wow,
look at the way that the turret is angled on the side. So bizarre. How does that even work? I guess it has like a real big extension over. And I guess this side, that's why it can't fully traverse, because of the fact that it's angled.
This vehicle acquires a more modern look.
Wow.
While keeping the rotating turret feature.
Can't go that far, right?
The arc is not 60 degrees, but 90.
So it can go more than the Tier 7 could, but still limited, I guess, because of the way that the turret is designed and the fact that this part would catch if it was to go more as the lip raises up.
45 degrees to either side. The frontal armor is stronger compared to Tier 7. And
interesting how they haven't rendered any of the lower tier tanks, but they've definitely been super testing the Tier 8 to see how it plays, right? Man, what a beautiful texture on it. I really like the Italian colors. I think that they're absolutely fantastic in World of Tanks.
This affects the vehicle's mobility accordingly.
How so?
It doesn't turn into the T95.
Okay, so I guess Wargaming is suggesting that it doesn't turn into the T95, aka being really slow, but
difficult to change positions in it quickly.
Okay.
The Controcarro Mod 67 is armed with an accurate 120mm gun.
Interesting that they say it's armed with an accurate 122mm gun. Sorry, 120mm gun, because of course, yesterday we found out that the Vipera is going to be anything but inaccurate. Sorry, I mean obviously anything but accurate, because .44 is horrendous.
With a drum-type autoloader and 10 degrees of gun depression.
These tanks look really good, but again, they're not talking about that intraclip reload yet.
The vehicle has an interesting exterior feature.
What is it?
A noticeable slope of the turret ring.
For sure. That's what stands out.
In reality, such a solution will allow for a more rational vehicle layout.
Rational?
The crew could be in the cabin without increasing the height of the vehicle itself.
Oh, okay.
In the game, such a design allows for blocking damage from behind cover while not decreasing gun depression on the sides.
I wonder if this is going to be overmatchable. Probably won't be, right? Also, I really like the angling all the way down the side. This thing could be absolutely voracious.
Which happens.
Oh, by the way, let's stop and take a look at that. That looks like a bit of a weak point on top. We couldn't see with the Vipera yesterday, but if the Tier 8 is anything to go by, that does look like that will be an opportunity. And if you're not using your gun depression, it looks like it could be quite weak. Possibly. I'm only guessing here.
In some tanks or turreted tank destroyers. At
Tier
9, there's
Tier 9 already.
Controcarro 1 MK2.
Okay, so it's the Controcarro Mark II. That turret, so bizarre. Can't really think anything that looks like that inside the game. That's a huge turret. You could fit a whole party inside there.
The idea of this tank destroyer was inspired by joint American and German developments that corresponded with Italian views on tank destroyers.
It does feel like it's got more of a kind of a leopardish kind of hull with the design, right? With the way that it's got that big old back. And then everything focused at the front with regards to the turret.
The concept of a tank destroyer with partial turret traverse, average mobility and
Why does Wargaming make these vehicles look so fast when they do all their zoom-ins and you see all the mud flying? And they're probably not going to be all that quick.
Excellent frontal armor was also implemented for this vehicle. What changed is its gun. The caliber increased to 127mm.
So will that increase the alpha damage? Possibly. 127mm caliber guns will probably get about 440 compared to the previous tank, which is probably going to end up getting 400 alpha damage.
But the autoloader remained. Due to the sum of all its characteristics, the Controcarro 1 MK2 is an excellent candidate for the penultimate vehicle of the branch.
Didn't really talk too much about the Tier 9.
Engineering, however, is the Controcarro 3 Minotauro.
The Minotauro. The Minotauro! Oh my lord, look at that thing. The front armor looks just like a T110E5 kind of vibe to it. Doesn't look as, obviously it feels a bit like a wide T110E5. Let me clarify, that is not a good thing. The turret on this tank though looks absolutely awesome. Man, so smooth, so well rounded. If that has got a thick impenetrable turret, this thing is going to be amazing. However, I'm expecting that Jagdpanzer E100 drivers are already salivating at the prospect of dumping in their super high penetration TD rounds into that turret, because it does look, even though it's rounded, it's still pretty flat, let's be honest. Obviously, if this thing's using its gun depression, its turret armor is going to end up being significantly better. It's a tough one. It's a tough one to really gauge about how thick this is going to be.
You can see the influence of both American and German tank building in this.
So absolutely bizarre. Nothing in the game like that. Although we said that about the Yo tanks, right? And they ended up being a little bit of a flop.
This vehicle. This tank destroyer embodied all the ideas that were developed by the previous tank destroyers of this branch. A rotating turret with a limited gun traverse arc of 90 degrees. And
so a lot like an FV215B, 183.
10 degrees of gun depression.
With the gun depression of an FV4005. Nice so far.
Excellent frontal armor that is well in balance with the vehicle's mobility.
What is excellent wargaming? Are we talking about T110E3 excellent? Are we talking about T110E4 excellent? Big differences.
And the 130mm gun with an auto-loader.
So obviously more alpha damage coming up.
That's not your regular auto-loader.
Why not? 530 alpha damage. I'm not sure if I'm blocking. I'm not. 24 seconds to reload the entire drum.
5 shells, good damage per shot. 24 seconds to reload the entire drum.
But 8 seconds intra-clip reload. Did you see how they just went like, let's get it off the screen quickly before they notice?
And 8 seconds between the shots.
At least they admitted it. That's not
You
good.
can hardly say this is something classic.
It isn't. It's bizarre.
And if all these characteristics might look strange on paper, the Italian can also surprise you in practice.
Okay, let's rewind to the statistics just quickly. 530 alpha damage, 24 seconds reload, and then 8 seconds intra-clip reload. Well, Wargaming, I'd hate to break it to you, but there's already an assault tank destroyer in the game that, while it doesn't have 45 degrees to the left and to the right gun arc, the Badger can already do 15 degrees to the left and to the right and feels very flexible. It also has 10 degrees of gun depression. It also has very thick armor until people start caking it with super high penetration gold. And more importantly, this thing has a reload time of 8.5 seconds before, of course, everyone who's worth their salt is going to end up putting gun rammer and vents on this thing, taking a slot. Let's make this to the effective values. Let's add in a pudding and tea, because we know a lot of people are, and brothers in arms as well. Next, you can reconfigure the ammo rack to be able to improve the rate of fire there, and if you're really weird, you could be able to put better equipment in, and you could even use yourself a directive slot if that is your vibe. And then you can get the reload of this tank down to 6.21 seconds. Now, while you could argue it has 480 alpha damage and it doesn't have the 530 that the Minotauro has, I can tell you I'd rather have a Badger and to be able to constantly be able to get those rounds out, switch between regular rounds, switch between gold rounds, switch between the regular, the insanely awesome high explosive rounds, and not just have to faff with this 24-second reload that is here. So it'll be interesting to see how Wargaming balance this thing out compared to the Badger.
5 shells, good damage per shot.
I guess the advantage of the Minotauro will be that you can effectively not have to use a gun rammer and maybe invest it into a turbo instead, or to increase the durability of the tracks. But undoubtedly, this is not something classic as Wargaming
These
says.
characteristics might look strange on paper.
They do.
The Italian can also surprise you in practice.
How can it surprise me?
You should play this vehicle as a regular tank with a cyclic gun.
Yeah.
With its alpha damage and reload, one drum is enough to outshoot many opponents.
Sure, it's going to be able to pretty much take out an entire tank if, of course, they wait for the 32 seconds that it takes to be able to fire out its magazine. And trust me, 32 seconds in World of Tanks is not a long time for those 2 tanks on the enemy team to be able to track you, get your side, and farm you up.
Yes, you will pay for it with a reload of the entire drum.
Yep.
But first of all, it takes only 24 seconds.
It's so bizarre that this tank takes 24 seconds to reload an entire magazine, yet it takes 32 seconds to be able to unload it. What? It's this topsy-turvy kind of idea.
And secondly, the enemy will never know when exactly you're reloading.
What Wargaming are effectively doing is they are enabling a tank to probably have more flexible statistics than the Badger, but it comes at the and it's able to have the burst damage of a Badger, but then it has a vulnerability downtime period. That is what Wargaming are doing. They're trying to find a way to create another Badger-esque DPM tank that has better statistics in other areas, but has a vulnerability with regards to the downtime.
At any moment of battle, and in any situation, opponents can't just track how many shells you have. You can start reloading after 3 shots, so the countdown starts. The enemy counts 8 seconds before your next shot. Then they think that you're hesitating for a few seconds.
Hold on, if he fired, why would the T125 ever sit there if he knows you've got an 8-second thing? What's he trying to do, bounce you? No, the T125 wants to close the distance and lock the tracks down and get the sides of the Minotauro. The worst thing the T125 could ever do would be sitting there and waiting for the Minotauro's 8-second reload so it can fire at it again.
A few more seconds to roll out. Mutual intimidation and...
Mutual intimidation from what? You've got an 8-second intraclip reload. If this T125 doesn't come round the corner after you fired at him and take the next corner, he's an idiot.
So on. And only then comes the moment your opponent realizes you are reloading.
Reloading? No, because the line is so blurred between an intraclip reload and reloading an entire magazine. There's a huge... It's like you're fighting against a regular heavy. You know, you're fighting against an E100 because that's what the alpha damage is. The E100 that uses the 128mm caliber gun has 530 damage and roughly about the same kind of reload as the Minotauro. In fact, just to show you, with regular equipment, not Bond equipment on the E100, I can get the reload down to 9.3 seconds with exactly the same alpha damage as the Minotauro. So the Minotauro, at best, is going to have about a 1 second better reload with its intraclip than the E100 with regular equipment. But remember, the E100 doesn't have to have 24 seconds of downtime after it's fired 5 shots.
But what they didn't take into account is that there's little time left until the reload is complete.
He didn't fire twice. So what did he do? Reload and then fire out 3 shots and they did a supercut? I think that was... let's just say they're fabricating an engagement there. And I really don't see it going like that all that often. I don't really feel that the Minotauro is going to be able to significantly prevent people from being able to just lock its tracks down, get its sides, but more importantly, to stop multiple tanks from being able to catch it at a moment's notice. And then it just, how are Wargaming going to balance it to both have the firepower of a Badger but not also be vulnerable in other areas? And how are Wargaming also going to balance it for such a long intraclip reload with also having the downtime of the full 24-second reload? This is going to be an incredibly challenging vehicle to balance, and I'm really interested to see what Wargaming are going to do outside of giving this thing an auto reloader. But that would kind of defeat the whole principle.
Such a concept of the auto-loader makes the Minotauro an absolutely unique vehicle.
Definitely.
And most importantly, it makes it a vehicle that you should always be aware of. Because in theory, facing the Minotauro means always facing a vehicle that will win in a duel.
Wargaming, I think you might be embellishing here a little bit. You know, an E100 can get very close to having the burst damage of a Minotauro without actually having to have the 24-second downtime of reloading after you inevitably bounce, miss, or just fire out those 5 shots.
And even if the opponent manages to figure it all out, count all seconds, and think of all the options in their head, they will also need to penetrate your TD.
That's where this tank could be strong. You know, with that armor. If this thing has ridiculous armor, then it'll be interesting. However, how can they make the armor that much better than a Badger? Because the Badger already has fantastic armor. If they do give it better than Badger armor, then this thing will be very interesting indeed. But if they do that, this thing could just end up being crazy overpowered. So it'll be very interesting to see how Wargaming balance it out. If its lower plate is vulnerable, I think this thing is going to be awful. If its lower plate is kind of like a Badger but just better, then it could be a half-decent tank. But I think it's going to be quite cumbersome and quite, even though it's got the turret quite inflexible with regards to being able to adapt to the situation.
So this is what makes the new Italian an excellent vehicle for close-range combat. It's ready to dictate the terms of battle, it's ready to adapt to the enemy's style, and it's ready to win.
I would strongly disagree with those couple of statements. I don't think it's ready to adapt to the enemy's style. I think that a good player on the enemy team will actually adapt their style to be able to outplay the Minotauro. I think it's the kind of tank we just got to hope that your enemies make mistakes to be able to adapt your play style to account for some of your tank's dubious statistics.
In addition to researchable vehicles, the Italians will also have a Tier 8 premium tank destroyer.
Which I talked all about yesterday.
Be the Semovente Controcarro Mod 1964 Vipera. Work on this combat vehicle should have turned into the development of turreted tank destroyers, conducted by the AUTOLOADERS company. Unfortunately, this vehicle remained in the draft stage. One of the reasons was the appearance of a new, more promising project.
So it doesn't really look like it has that many weak points on top, boys and girls, and that was one of my biggest concerns of the tank, is that if it doesn't have weak points, what are people going to be able to do about it?
However, such an interesting vehicle couldn't yet appear in the game. So it's the Semovente Controcarro Mod 1964 Vipera that heads to the super test first, based on which the characteristic...
Maybe a little bit of a rim doesn't really look like it. If this tank is using its 10 degrees of gun depression, good luck. So I have a funny feeling that Wargaming will just have to make these cheeks not too strong. But considering that they said, at least yesterday, everything's subject to change, they have 275mm of armor, I think this is the kind of tank that's going to be incredibly good in a good matchup, but as soon as it ends up against tier 10 heat, it's going to feel like a little bit of a wet paper bag.
Characteristics of the whole branch will be adjusted while keeping the overall concept. In terms of gameplay, the vehicle will resemble a researchable tier 10 TD, but its characteristics will clearly refer to the researchable tier 8 vehicle. The tier 8 Controcarro Mod 67 features decent dynamics and armor, plus it has a menacing 120mm gun with a 5-shell autoloader, the familiar gun depression angles of 10 degrees, and a rotatable turret with a gun traverse arc of 90 degrees. Just like the tier 10 TD, this vehicle is fit for combat on the front line. It also features an unconventional autoloader. The reload of 8 seconds between shots and the high damage per shot allow for winning one-on-ones against many opponents.
Okay, so even in Wargaming's video, they thought that it was going to have 8 seconds reload. But again, the new information that has been given out to the community contributors is that its reload is now 6 seconds.
However, also like the Tier 10 TD, this premium vehicle will have a deterring factor: drum reload. But unlike in regular tanks with the autoloader, the reload won't keep you away from battle for too long, so you can reset your drum at any time. For example, when you realize you don't have enough shells to finish off an opponent.
It's still going to be a substantial reload though, ladies and gents, boys and girls. 36 seconds? But yeah, very flexible, 36 seconds. That's not flexible. Flexible is like 20 seconds on a TVP or on a T-57 Heavy, not 36 seconds.
Or when you plan to destroy one enemy vehicle and switch to another one right away. In such situations, you can start reloading right in the middle of battle. At the same time, due to the atypical reload between shots, your enemy still doesn't know what you're doing. reloading one shell or the entire drum, and when they figure it out, you're nearly ready for a new duel.
The bottom line is, when you're facing these tanks, is that what you're going to have to do is just pressure them anyway. They've got an 8-second reload. The burst damage isn't even that good. This thing isn't firing, well, 6-second reload now already, right? The rate of fire is not that much better than a TS5. When you're fighting a TS5, do you just go, better not go round the corner? No, you're trying to get it. You're either trying to hit its weak point on top, you're trying to track it, get its side, lock it down. You're not going to just sit there and not continue to fight these things. It's not like an autoloader where you have to try and survive the burst damage. You're just going to have to fight these things as if they're regular tank destroyers because they have regular tank destroyer DPM even while they're unloading. And then just hopefully you won't make the mistake then of not catching it when it is reloading during those down times.
It's hard to say which characteristics of this vehicle will be final. That's what tests are for. But it's already clear that the branch will have some unique gameplay.
100%.
And the future premium vehicle will be among the first to help you get familiar with it.
Wait.
We plan to create a special group of tank destroyers
with
strong armor, rotating turrets, and an auto-loader. This means their unpredictability in combat, depending on the tactics, will depend solely on you.
No,
These
that's a bit
vehicles will
bold.
be set very carefully to keep them in general balance, make them memorable, and most importantly, bring you new and interesting experiences.
Fantastic. That's what it's about. So obviously, as the game gets older, it's becoming harder and harder and harder for wargaming to add in new mechanics that are interesting, right? Originally, it was easy as in add an autoloader. Then it was add in hydropneumatic suspensions with the Swedish tanks. Then it was adding in autoloaders that could be able to burst out the damage faster. Then it was kind of adding in auto reloaders. And then it was adding in auto reloaders with compensation mechanics. And then it was adding in autoloaders with even more insane burst damage like the VZ55. So I do think that it's always a challenge for wargaming to try and figure out how they can balance tanks. I just think that this feels like a bit of an unwinnable situation. And I genuinely think that it might have been more interesting to balance them out as auto reloading tank destroyers. But maybe they've already thought about that. Maybe they thought that it would be too challenging because you can't make a tank destroyer flexible without it being overpowered. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that was the Italian tank destroyers. I really hope that you liked my breakdown and my critique and hopefully my constructive feedback, wargaming, for the Italian tank destroyer branch. All of my concerns, all of my desires. I love new tanks. It's my favorite thing. And as soon as I get my hands on these things on a test server, I will undoubtedly break down all of them and try and figure out whether the Minotauro is going to be the new best tier 10 tank. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that was it for today. Really hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. Once again, massive thank you to you, Wargaming, for bringing new content to the game. Even though I'm a bit dubious about that intraclip reload mixed with the reload of the vehicle and the way that you presented the engagements and how they're going to go down, I just hope you know it's coming from a position of love and hoping that these tank destroyers are going to not just be frustrating. Because I've been a little bit disappointed with the Rinoceronte and the M5Y. Anyway, that's it. Hope you enjoyed. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic and hopefully I'll see you soon.